For more than half a century, Clint Eastwood stood as one of the last true symbols of old-school Hollywood toughness. He wasn't just an actor. He was an image, a presence, a man whose cold stare alone could silence an entire room. Generations grew up watching Eastwood dominate movie screens with a level of confidence that felt almost unreal. Whether he was playing the ruthless man with no name or the fearless Dirty Harry, audiences believed Clint Eastwood could survive anything. But now, at 95 years old, heartbreaking health concerns and emotional reports surrounding the legendary filmmaker are causing fans around the world to ask the same painful question. Is Hollywood slowly saying goodbye to one of its final icons? In recent years, Eastwood's public appearances have become increasingly rare, and when he does appear, fans immediately notice the changes. The once unstoppable Hollywood giant now moves much slower than before. His face appears thinner. His body looks noticeably frailer. Even his famous posture, once powerful and intimidating, has visibly weakened with age. For longtime admirers, seeing Clint Eastwood in this condition feels deeply emotional because his entire career was built on strength. He represented endurance, masculinity, and control for decades. Eastwood rarely showed weakness publicly. He almost never complained. Unlike many celebrities, he avoided emotional interviews and stayed away from Hollywood drama whenever possible. That silence is exactly why recent concerns have become so powerful. People close to Eastwood reportedly say the legendary actor has become far more private over the past few years. While he always valued solitude, insiders claim age has significantly changed his daily routine. Sources suggest he spends much of his time away from Hollywood crowds, focusing quietly on his health and conserving energy whenever possible. Some reports indicate Eastwood now limits unnecessary travel and avoids large public events unless absolutely necessary. Friends allegedly encourage him to rest more frequently, especially considering the enormous demands filmmaking can place on someone in their 90s. At 95, even simple activities can become physically exhausting. And yet, what shocks many people is that Clint Eastwood never truly slowed down mentally. Despite his physical decline, Hollywood insiders continue describing him as sharp, focused, and creatively active. Several people who worked with Eastwood in recent years claimed his mind remains incredibly disciplined. His instincts as a director reportedly remain intact, even while his body struggles to maintain the same pace. That contrast makes his situation even more heartbreaking. On one side stands the brilliant filmmaker whose vision transformed modern cinema forever. On the other side is an elderly man fighting the unavoidable reality of aging in front of millions of fans who still see him as immortal. And perhaps that is the cruelest part of fame. The public often forgets that icons grow old too. For decades, Clint Eastwood looked almost invincible. While other stars faded, Eastwood somehow continued directing major films well into his 80s and 90s. Many people genuinely believed he would continue working forever. Every time he announced another project, audiences reacted with shock and admiration. But eventually time catches everyone. Fans became especially emotional after recent photographs surfaced online showing Eastwood looking noticeably weaker than in previous years. Social media immediately exploded with reactions. Some people expressed concern about his health, while others struggled emotionally seeing such a powerful figure appear physically fragile. Comments poured in from around the world. Many longtime fans admitted the images were difficult to look at. Others described feeling like they were witnessing the end of an era. Some even compared the moment to losing a piece of Hollywood history itself. And in many ways, that may be true. Clint Eastwood does not simply represent one actor. He represents an entire generation of cinema that is slowly disappearing. His films carried a style modern Hollywood rarely produces anymore: quiet intensity, raw realism, and emotionally controlled storytelling. Eastwood belonged to an era when actors didn't constantly explain themselves to the media. Mystery was part of their identity. Toughness mattered. Silence mattered. Today's entertainment world feels completely different. That cultural shift has only intensified the emotional reactions surrounding Eastwood's current condition. Fans are not just watching a man age. They are watching one of the final surviving symbols of classic Hollywood slowly fade from public life. But the emotional weight surrounding Clint Eastwood's story goes far beyond health concerns alone. Behind the scenes, Eastwood has endured enormous personal loss throughout his long life. Many of his closest collaborators and friends are now gone. Fellow actors, directors, producers, and lifelong companions who once stood beside him during Hollywood's golden decades have gradually disappeared over time. For someone who lived through so many eras of cinema, that kind of loneliness can become devastating. Several entertainment insiders believe Eastwood's emotional isolation may be one of the hidden struggles fans rarely think about. While the public focuses on physical health, aging legends often face another painful reality, outliving almost everyone around them. And for Clint Eastwood, that reality appears increasingly unavoidable. The tragedy becomes even more emotional when people remember how unstoppable he once seemed. This was the same man who survived countless career reinventions. When critics doubted him as an actor, he became an Oscar-winning director. When Hollywood changed trends, Eastwood adapted. When younger stars replaced older legends, Clint somehow remained relevant decade after decade. Very few entertainers in history achieved what Eastwood accomplished. That is why today's health concerns feel so heavy emotionally. Because for many fans, Clint Eastwood was never supposed to look vulnerable. He was supposed to remain the strong, fearless figure audiences remembered forever. But life does not work that way. And now, at 95 years old, the painful reality facing Clint Eastwood has become impossible for fans to ignore. As Clint Eastwood entered his 90s, many people expected him to quietly disappear from Hollywood. That is usually how aging stars handle the final chapter of their careers. They step away from cameras, avoid attention, and slowly retreat from public life. But Eastwood never followed the normal rules of Hollywood. Even in advanced age, he continued working at a pace that shocked younger filmmakers. While actors half his age spoke openly about burnout, Eastwood still showed up focused, organized, and determined to create. That work ethic became legendary inside the entertainment industry. Crew members who worked with him often described him as calm, efficient, and incredibly disciplined, even during long production days. But behind that determination, signs of physical exhaustion reportedly became harder to ignore. Sources close to productions involving Eastwood allegedly noticed that age was beginning to affect him more visibly than before. While his mind remained sharp, his energy levels reportedly fluctuated throughout the day. Standing for long periods became more difficult. Walking appeared slower and more cautious. Some insiders quietly worried that the physical demands of directing were becoming too much for a man approaching 100 years old. For fans, these reports were heartbreaking because Clint Eastwood built his identity around endurance. He represented resilience in a way very few celebrities ever could. Through changing decades, changing audiences, and changing political climates, Eastwood somehow remained standing while many other legends disappeared completely. That longevity made him feel almost permanent. But recent years have forced fans to confront a painful truth. Even the strongest Hollywood icons eventually reach a fragile stage of life. There is also growing emotional discussion surrounding Eastwood's increasingly limited public appearances. Unlike some celebrities who constantly remain visible through interviews or social media, Eastwood has largely vanished from the spotlight. Months can pass without major updates about him. Then suddenly, a photograph or brief appearance surfaces online, immediately sparking concern among fans. Each new image seems to trigger the same emotional reaction. People analyze his posture, his facial expressions, his physical condition, his weight, his walk. And while some fans argue that Eastwood still looks remarkable for his age, others cannot hide their sadness seeing how much time has changed him. The emotional impact becomes even stronger because Clint Eastwood spent decades portraying fearless characters who never appeared weak. In movie after movie, he embodied control and authority. Audiences became conditioned to seeing him dominate every room he entered. Now, seeing him move carefully and slowly creates a shocking contrast that many fans struggle to accept emotionally. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Eastwood's current situation is the silence surrounding his private struggles. Clint Eastwood has never been the kind of celebrity to publicly discuss pain. He rarely gives deeply personal interviews. He avoids dramatic confessions. Even throughout difficult moments in his life, he maintained emotional distance from the media. That privacy has only fueled speculation about his true condition today. Some insiders believe Eastwood intentionally stays away from Hollywood because he does not want fans witnessing his decline too closely. Others think he simply prefers peace and solitude after spending more than 70 years inside the entertainment industry. Whatever the reason may be, his absence has created an almost haunting feeling among longtime admirers. Many fans fear that every appearance could potentially be one of his last. That emotional uncertainty has transformed ordinary public sightings into massive news stories online. Even brief moments involving Eastwood quickly spread across social media platforms and entertainment websites. The public fascination surrounding his health continues growing because people understand they are witnessing the closing chapter of a truly historic life. And what a life it has been! Very few people in Hollywood history remained culturally relevant across as many generations as Clint Eastwood. He survived the collapse of the old studio system. He adapted through massive industry changes. He transitioned from television star to global movie icon to Academy Award-winning director. Most careers collapse after one successful era. Eastwood conquered multiple eras. That extraordinary legacy makes his aging process feel deeply personal to millions of people worldwide. Fans are not simply reacting to celebrity health updates. They are reacting to the gradual fading of someone whose films shaped entire periods of their lives. For older audiences, Eastwood represents memories of a completely different America and a completely different Hollywood. For younger viewers, he symbolizes timeless masculinity and cinematic greatness. And now, all generations are watching the same painful reality unfold together. Some entertainment analysts believe Eastwood's current condition reflects a larger emotional shift happening inside Hollywood itself. The industry is slowly losing many of its last classic-era legends. With every passing year, fewer stars remain from the generation that defined 20th century cinema. That reality gives every Clint Eastwood update enormous emotional weight. Because when fans look at Eastwood today, they are not only seeing an aging actor, they are seeing the survival of an entire disappearing era. Despite growing concerns, however, many people close to Eastwood insist he remains mentally engaged and emotionally determined. Reports suggest he still follows industry developments closely and continues discussing creative ideas privately. That persistence reflects the same relentless personality that carried him through decades of success. But no amount of determination can fully stop time. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood now faces the same battle every aging person eventually confronts: the slow physical decline that arrives regardless of fame, strength, or legacy. And for fans who once believed Eastwood was indestructible, that realization may be the hardest part of all. As concern surrounding Clint Eastwood continues to grow, many fans have started revisiting old interviews and classic film moments, searching for signs of the man they once knew. Across social media, clips of Eastwood during his prime regularly resurface. The cold stare from Dirty Harry, the quiet confidence of the good, the bad, and the ugly, the commanding presence he carried into nearly every role throughout his legendary career. Watching those moments today feels different. What once looked powerful now feels emotional. Fans are no longer simply admiring a Hollywood icon. They are remembering someone who symbolized strength during entire decades of American cinema. And knowing that the same man is now navigating the painful realities of old age has created an overwhelming sense of sadness among longtime admirers. For many people, Clint Eastwood represented stability. His image rarely changed. His personality remained consistent. Even as Hollywood became louder, more chaotic, and more dependent on controversy, Eastwood maintained a calm and controlled public identity. That consistency made audiences feel like he would somehow last forever. But recent health discussions have shattered that illusion. According to entertainment insiders, Eastwood's inner circle has reportedly become much smaller over time. At his age, maintaining close relationships becomes increasingly difficult, especially after decades of personal loss. Friends disappear. Colleagues pass away. Entire generations slowly vanish. And for someone who spent over 70 years in Hollywood, the emotional toll of outliving so many people can become almost impossible to describe. Some sources believe this emotional isolation may affect Eastwood more deeply than fans realize. While he has always appeared emotionally reserved in public, aging often forces people into periods of reflection. And Clint Eastwood has lived through extraordinary highs and devastating losses alike. Throughout his life, he experienced broken relationships, family struggles, intense Hollywood pressure, and the enormous burden of fame itself. Yet he rarely allowed the public to see his pain. Instead, he continued working, continued directing, continued moving forward. That silent endurance became part of his legend. But silence can also become loneliness. In recent years, reports surrounding Eastwood's personal routine suggest a much quieter existence than the glamorous Hollywood lifestyle people might imagine. Rather than attending major celebrity gatherings or constantly appearing in public, Eastwood reportedly spends much of his time privately, away from cameras and media attention. Some fans respect that deeply. Others find it heartbreaking, because every year that passes increases fears that audiences may eventually lose one of cinema's final living giants forever. What makes the situation even more emotional is the fact that Eastwood never seemed interested in slowing down voluntarily. Unlike many stars who publicly announce retirement tours or farewell appearances, Clint Eastwood appeared determined to keep creating as long as physically possible. That mindset earned him enormous respect across Hollywood. Younger directors often spoke about Eastwood with genuine awe. Many actors described working with him as a career-defining experience. Even people who disagreed with him politically or personally still acknowledged his discipline and filmmaking brilliance. Very few figures in entertainment command that level of universal respect. And perhaps that is why fans react so emotionally to every health update involving him. Because Clint Eastwood no longer feels like just another celebrity. He feels historic. For decades, Eastwood's movies reflected themes of survival, aging, regret, and mortality long before those subjects became part of his real life. In films like Gran Torino and Unforgiven, audiences watched Eastwood portray older men confronting loneliness, violence, and the weight of time itself. Looking back now, those performances feel almost haunting. It is as though Eastwood understood exactly where life eventually leads, even while he was still working at the highest level creatively. That emotional connection between his films and his current reality has only intensified public fascination surrounding his condition today. Many fans now describe watching Eastwood age as similar to watching a family member grow older. His career lasted so long that multiple generations formed emotional attachments to him across completely different periods of life. Grandparents watched his westerns. Parents grew up with Dirty Harry. Younger audiences discovered him through his directing career. Very few entertainers bridge generations in that way. And now, millions of people from different age groups are experiencing the same uncomfortable realization together. Clint Eastwood is human after all. No legend escapes time. No icon escapes aging. No amount of fame can protect someone from physical decline. That truth may sound obvious, but emotionally, audiences often resist accepting it when it involves figures they admired their entire lives. Especially someone like Clint Eastwood. Because Eastwood's entire identity challenged weakness. His characters rarely backed down, rarely showed fear, rarely surrendered control. He embodied independence and toughness so convincingly that fans unconsciously expected the real man to remain powerful forever. Now, reality has replaced fantasy. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood reportedly faces the same daily physical limitations that affect many elderly people around the world. Simple tasks require more energy. Movement becomes slower. Public appearances become exhausting. And while none of that diminishes his accomplishments, it changes the emotional way fans view him forever. Still, despite the sadness surrounding his health concerns, there remains something undeniably inspiring about Eastwood's story. Even now, his legacy continues influencing cinema globally. Young filmmakers study his directing style. Actors continue quoting his performances. His movies remain part of film history permanently. Very few people leave behind work powerful enough to survive generations. Clint Eastwood did exactly that. And perhaps that is the bittersweet reality fans are struggling to accept today. The man himself may be slowing down, but the legend never will. As the years continue passing, the emotional conversation surrounding Clint Eastwood has shifted from admiration to concern, and now, for many fans, to heartbreak. There was once a time when the idea of Clint Eastwood becoming physically fragile seemed impossible. He looked eternal on screen, untouchable. Even his silence carried authority. But today, every new public sighting becomes a reminder that one of Hollywood's final giants is slowly entering the final chapter of life. And perhaps the hardest part for fans is seeing how quickly time seems to have moved. To younger generations, Clint Eastwood was always old, but powerful old. Even in his 70s and 80s, he carried himself with confidence that most actors lose decades earlier. He directed critically acclaimed films, appeared at major events, and continued speaking with the same calm intensity audiences remembered from decades before. That consistency created the illusion that he would never truly decline. Now that the physical signs of aging are impossible to ignore, many people are struggling emotionally to process the change. Several entertainment reporters who observed Eastwood during recent appearances noted how carefully he now moves in public settings. Gone is the fast, confident stride fans remember from earlier years. Instead, observers describe slower movements, measured steps, and moments where age visibly appears to weigh heavily on him. For most people, this would not be shocking at 95 years old. But Clint Eastwood was never viewed as most people. He became larger than life long ago. That larger-than-life reputation is exactly what makes his current condition feel so emotional worldwide. Fans are not simply watching an elderly actor age naturally. They are watching a symbol of strength slowly become vulnerable. And vulnerability was something Eastwood almost never showed publicly. Throughout his legendary career, he built a reputation for emotional control. Interviews rarely became personal. Public scandals rarely consumed him. He carried himself with discipline that separated him from many other Hollywood celebrities. Even during painful periods of his private life, Eastwood rarely allowed the public to see him break emotionally. That restraint became part of his mystique. But aging changes even the strongest personalities. Sources close to Eastwood reportedly say the legendary filmmaker has become increasingly reflective in recent years. While he still values privacy deeply, insiders claim he spends more time focusing on family, memories, and personal peace than on Hollywood itself. Some believe Eastwood intentionally stepped away from public attention because he understands how audiences react emotionally to aging icons. Hollywood has always celebrated youth, strength, and image. Watching legendary stars grow frail can be deeply uncomfortable for the public, and Clint Eastwood may understand that better than anyone. After all, he spent decades studying human nature through filmmaking. His movies often explored mortality, loneliness, regret, and the emotional consequences of violence and aging. In many ways, the themes he directed on screen now mirror the reality he personally faces. That connection makes his current situation feel almost cinematic and painfully real at the same time. Fans frequently revisit Eastwood's older films now with completely different emotions. Scenes that once felt exciting now feel bittersweet. His performances as aging men confronting isolation suddenly appear prophetic. Particularly in films like Gran Torino, audiences now see something far deeper than acting. They see a man quietly preparing for the emotional realities of growing old. That realization has only intensified public sadness surrounding his health updates. Some longtime admirers admit they avoid recent photos of Eastwood entirely because they prefer remembering him as the fearless icon from his prime years. Others continue following every update closely, hoping for reassurance that he remains mentally strong and emotionally stable despite physical decline. And according to people close to him, Eastwood's mind reportedly remains remarkably active. That may be the most extraordinary detail of all. Even at 95 years old, insiders claim he still discusses storytelling ideas, follows film industry developments, and maintains strong opinions about cinema. His creative instincts reportedly remain sharp, even while his body continues slowing down. That determination reflects the same relentless mentality that carried him through one of the longest careers in entertainment history. Because Clint Eastwood was never driven purely by fame. He was driven by purpose. That purpose helped him survive decades of industry change while countless other stars disappeared. He adapted when Hollywood transformed. He reinvented himself repeatedly. And somehow, generation after generation continued respecting him. Very few celebrities achieve that kind of longevity without becoming caricatures of themselves. Eastwood never lost his authenticity, which is why the possibility of losing him someday feels so enormous to fans around the world. For many people, Clint Eastwood represents more than movies. He represents fathers and grandfathers. He represents memories of watching old westerns with family members who may no longer be alive themselves. He represents a version of masculinity and storytelling that many believe modern Hollywood abandoned long ago. In some ways, fans are mourning more than Clint Eastwood's aging. They are mourning an entire disappearing era. And that emotional connection explains why every update about his health spreads so rapidly online. The public understands that there will never be another Clint Eastwood. Hollywood may continue producing stars, but figures like him belong to a completely different generation of cinema. A generation built on mystery, discipline, and presence rather than non-stop publicity. Now, at 95 years old, Clint Eastwood stands as one of the final surviving links to that world. And while his body may be weakening with time, the emotional impact of his legacy remains stronger than ever. That is why fans continue watching closely. Not because they expect miracles, but because saying goodbye to someone like Clint Eastwood feels like saying goodbye to a piece of history itself. For many fans, the most painful part about watching Clint Eastwood grow older is realizing how deeply connected his image became to their own lives. His movies were not just entertainment. They became memories attached to entire generations. People remember watching his westerns with their fathers, seeing Dirty Harry for the first time in packed theaters, or discovering his later films during difficult periods of their own lives. That emotional connection is why every health update surrounding Eastwood now feels personal to millions of people around the world. And recently, concerns have only continued growing. Entertainment insiders claim Eastwood has become increasingly selective about who he spends time with and where he appears publicly. At 95 years old, protecting energy and maintaining health reportedly became a major priority in his daily routine. Those close to him allegedly encourage him to avoid unnecessary stress, especially considering the physical demands aging places on the body. For someone who spent decades appearing unstoppable, even these small details feel shocking to longtime fans. Because Clint Eastwood's identity was built around independence. He was the lone cowboy, the fearless detective, the aging fighter who refused to back down. Even in real life, Eastwood projected the image of someone completely in control. He rarely seemed emotional publicly, rarely vulnerable, rarely uncertain. Now, however, age has introduced a reality no amount of discipline can fully overcome. And perhaps that is what makes his story so heartbreaking. For decades, audiences viewed Eastwood almost like a myth rather than an ordinary person. Hollywood itself helped create that image. Directors framed him as invincible. Studios marketed him as untouchable. Fans embraced him as a symbol of strength during changing times in American culture. But behind every legend is still a human being. Aging, losing energy, experiencing loneliness, facing mortality. The emotional weight surrounding Eastwood's current condition became even heavier after several online discussions focused on how dramatically Hollywood has changed around him. Many fans believe Clint Eastwood represents one of the last surviving connections to classic American cinema, an era built on character, presence, and storytelling rather than constant controversy and social media attention. That disappearing world has made Eastwood's aging feel symbolic in ways few celebrities ever experience. When fans look at Clint Eastwood today, they are not simply looking at a 95-year-old actor. They are looking at the fading memory of an entire cinematic generation. And that realization carries enormous emotional power. Some film historians even argue that Eastwood's career may never be repeated again. Modern Hollywood rarely allows stars to evolve the way he did. He succeeded as an actor, director, producer, and cultural icon across multiple generations without completely reinventing himself for trends. Instead, he stayed Clint Eastwood. Quiet, controlled, disciplined. That consistency earned him respect from audiences who normally disagreed on almost everything else. Few entertainers maintained credibility for as long as Eastwood managed to do. Which is exactly why recent health concerns continue spreading so rapidly online whenever new reports emerge. People understand they are witnessing the final years of someone truly historic. And despite the sadness surrounding his condition, there remains enormous admiration for how Eastwood handled aging overall. Unlike some celebrities desperately chasing youth, Eastwood largely accepted the natural process of growing older. He never transformed himself into a media personality, searching for constant relevance. He simply continued working, continued creating, continued living quietly. That approach reflects the values many fans admired about him from the very beginning. Still, no amount of dignity can completely erase the emotional reality surrounding advanced age. At 95, even basic physical activity reportedly requires caution. Public outings appear increasingly limited. Friends close to Eastwood allegedly worry about fatigue and overall physical strain whenever he pushes himself too hard. For fans who grew up seeing Eastwood dominate movie screens with confidence and authority, these reports feel almost surreal. Some even describe the experience as emotionally confusing. How can someone who once looked indestructible suddenly appear fragile? The answer, of course, is simple. Time changes everyone. But emotionally, accepting that truth becomes much harder when the person involved shaped decades of cultural history. There is also growing public discussion about whether Eastwood fully understands how much he means to people worldwide. Over the years, countless actors described him as a mentor and inspiration. Directors praised his efficiency and creative instincts. Audiences admired his toughness and authenticity. Yet Eastwood himself rarely appeared interested in celebrity worship. That humility became another reason people respected him so deeply. Even after winning Academy Awards and building one of the most legendary careers in film history, he still carried himself with unusual simplicity compared to many Hollywood figures. Perhaps that grounded personality explains why fans now feel such profound sadness watching him decline physically. Because Clint Eastwood never seemed fake. He felt real, and real connections create real emotional reactions. Today, millions of people continue hoping Eastwood remains comfortable, peaceful, and surrounded by loved ones despite growing concerns surrounding his health. While nobody can stop aging, fans still want to believe the legendary filmmaker is finding moments of happiness away from public attention. After all he contributed to cinema, many feel he deserves that peace. But the emotional truth remains unavoidable. The world is slowly preparing for the eventual loss of one of Hollywood's greatest surviving legends. And for audiences who spend entire lifetimes watching Clint Eastwood stand tall against impossible odds, that reality feels almost impossible to accept. Because deep down, many fans never imagined a world without him. As conversations about Clint Eastwood continue spreading online, one theme appears again and again: disbelief. Even now, many fans struggle to emotionally accept that Clint Eastwood is 95 years old. For so long, he existed outside the normal rules of aging in the public imagination. While other celebrities retired quietly or disappeared from relevance, Eastwood somehow continued moving forward year after year, film after film. That extraordinary endurance created a dangerous illusion. People stopped imagining Clint Eastwood as mortal. But today, reality has become impossible to ignore. Recent discussions surrounding his health have forced fans to confront the painful truth that even the strongest legends eventually reach a point where time begins taking visible control. And in Eastwood's case, the emotional impact feels heavier than most celebrity aging stories because his entire image was built on strength, independence, and survival. For decades, Clint Eastwood represented the man who never backed down. On screen, he faced criminals, killers, war, corruption, and impossible odds without fear. Off-screen, he survived an industry notorious for destroying careers and reputations. Through changing political climates and massive shifts in entertainment culture, Eastwood somehow remained respected while many others faded away. That kind of longevity is almost unheard of in Hollywood, which is why the sight of him appearing physically weakened now creates such an emotional reaction worldwide. Several fans who attended rare recent public appearances described feeling shocked by how fragile Eastwood seemed compared to the powerful image burned into their memories. Though still recognizable instantly, the legendary actor reportedly appeared quieter, slower, and visibly exhausted at times. For many observers, the emotional contrast was overwhelming. This was the same man who once commanded movie screens with a single glare. Now audiences worry about his balance while walking. That painful transformation highlights something deeply human about aging that fame can never protect anyone from. No amount of success stops the body from changing. No legendary status prevents physical decline. And Clint Eastwood's story may be one of the clearest reminders of that reality in modern entertainment. Some fans have even admitted they avoid looking at current photographs of Eastwood because they prefer preserving the version they remember from his prime years. In their minds, Clint Eastwood still stands tall beneath a cowboy hat or stares down danger with absolute confidence. Seeing the real effects of age disrupts that emotional image. But others believe there is something important, even beautiful, about witnessing Eastwood age honestly. Unlike celebrities obsessed with maintaining artificial youth, Eastwood largely allowed himself to grow old naturally and privately. He did not spend decades desperately trying to recreate the image of his younger self. Instead, he accepted time quietly. That acceptance may actually reflect the themes explored throughout many of his greatest films. Eastwood's later movies often focused on regret, mortality, aging, redemption, and loneliness. Characters carried emotional scars. Heroes became tired. Strength came with consequences. Looking back now, many audiences believe Eastwood was preparing both himself and his fans for the realities of growing older long before his health became public discussion. That emotional depth is one reason his work continues resonating across generations. And now, those themes feel more personal than ever. According to reports from people familiar with Eastwood's lifestyle today, the legendary filmmaker remains determined to maintain independence despite his age. Sources suggest he still values routine, discipline, and privacy above almost everything else. However, insiders also claim those close to him have become increasingly protective regarding his physical well-being. At 95, even small health setbacks can become serious very quickly. That reality has reportedly caused growing concern among friends and family members who understand how fragile aging can become at such an advanced stage of life. Fans feel that fear too. Every new update about Eastwood now carries emotional weight because people understand there are very few remaining legends from his era still alive today. The golden age of Hollywood is disappearing piece by piece, and Clint Eastwood stands among the final towering figures still connected directly to that world. His eventual absence will not feel like the loss of an ordinary celebrity. For many people, it will feel like the closing of an entire cultural chapter. And perhaps that is why emotions surrounding him continue intensifying online. Younger stars may dominate headlines temporarily, but Clint Eastwood represents permanence. He survived trends. He survived criticism. He survived changing audiences. Through it all, he remained unmistakably himself. Modern Hollywood rarely creates figures with that kind of lasting impact anymore. Today's celebrity culture moves too fast. But Eastwood came from a time when stars became myths. And myths are difficult to watch grow old. Still, despite the sadness surrounding his health concerns, there remains enormous gratitude among fans worldwide. Many people now openly celebrate Eastwood, not only for his movies, but for the extraordinary length and significance of his career itself. Very few people spend more than 70 years influencing global culture at the highest level. Clint Eastwood did exactly that. He entertained generations, inspired filmmakers, defined entire genres, and created characters audiences will never forget. That legacy remains untouchable regardless of physical decline. Yet emotionally, fans still struggle because they are not only mourning the possibility of losing Clint Eastwood someday, they are mourning time itself. They are confronting their own aging through him. The children who once watched Eastwood films with their parents are now grandparents themselves. Entire lifetimes passed while Clint Eastwood somehow remained present in the background of popular culture. Now seeing him physically slow down forces millions of people to recognize how quickly life truly moves. And that realization may be the most heartbreaking part of all. For decades, Clint Eastwood seemed to exist above ordinary life. He was not simply viewed as an actor, but as a symbol of resilience itself. Audiences watched him survive every era of Hollywood imaginable. Black and white television disappeared. Movie trends changed repeatedly. Entire generations of stars came and went. Yet somehow, Clint Eastwood remained standing through all of it. That is why the emotional reaction surrounding his current health condition feels so unusually powerful. To many fans, Eastwood represented permanence in a world constantly changing. And now, at 95 years old, that permanence appears fragile for the very first time. Some entertainment observers believe one reason people are struggling emotionally with Eastwood's aging is because he never allowed audiences to see weakness during his prime years. His public image remained remarkably controlled. Even when controversies surrounded Hollywood, Eastwood rarely appeared shaken publicly. He projected calmness, authority, control. Those qualities became deeply attached to his identity both on and off screen. But aging eventually strips away illusions everyone carries about themselves, even legends. Recent reports suggest Eastwood's daily life has slowed dramatically compared to previous years. While he reportedly remains mentally engaged and aware, physical stamina naturally became more limited. Sources claim his closest companions now prioritize quiet routines and carefully manage schedules designed to reduce unnecessary strain. At his age, maintaining stability itself becomes an achievement. And fans understand that. Still, emotionally accepting it remains difficult. Many longtime admirers continue comparing modern photographs of Eastwood with memories from his iconic films decades ago. The contrast feels almost surreal. In one image stands the fearless actor who defined cinematic masculinity for generations. In the other stands a visibly aging man navigating the final years of life as privately as possible. Both versions are Clint Eastwood, Yet audiences emotionally connect far more strongly to the version they grew up idolizing. That emotional conflict explains why every health update surrounding Eastwood immediately spreads across the internet. People are not merely following celebrity news. They are trying to process the reality that someone they associated with strength their entire lives is now vulnerable. And vulnerability changes how audiences see even the greatest icons. Some film critics argue Eastwood's aging has unintentionally become one of the most profound final performances of his career, not because he is acting, but because he is facing mortality with the same quiet toughness that defined his films. Unlike celebrities who constantly publicize personal struggles, Eastwood continues maintaining distance from media attention. There are no dramatic social media messages, no emotional press conferences, no desperate attempts to remain relevant. Just silence. And strangely, that silence has made public concern even stronger. Because when someone like Clint Eastwood disappears from view, fans immediately fear the worst. Each new public appearance now carries emotional intensity that would have seemed unimaginable years ago. Simple photographs become major headlines. Brief sightings spark worldwide discussion. People analyze every detail, searching for reassurance that the legendary filmmaker is still doing okay. That level of emotional investment reveals how deeply Eastwood became woven into popular culture itself. For millions of people, he represents more than entertainment. He represents memories of simpler times, of old movie theaters, of family nights watching westerns, of fathers introducing sons to classic films, of a version of Hollywood built on presence instead of spectacle. And now, watching Eastwood age feels almost like watching those memories age too. Some fans have openly admitted that Clint Eastwood's health updates affect them more emotionally than celebrity news normally would. The reason may be simple. Eastwood lasted so long that people unconsciously assumed he always would. When someone remains culturally relevant for over half a century, the mind begins treating them as permanent. But no one is permanent. That painful realization becomes clearer with every passing year. Even so, many people close to Eastwood reportedly admire how he continues handling aging with dignity. While physical decline may be unavoidable, sources suggest he remains mentally determined and emotionally composed. That attitude reflects the same disciplined personality that carried him through decades of success. Eastwood was never known for self-pity, and according to many who know him, that has not changed. Still, even the strongest personalities cannot escape the emotional realities that come with advanced age. Loneliness becomes more common. Energy fades. Public life becomes exhausting. The body gradually demands limitations the mind may not fully accept. Those realities appear increasingly present in Eastwood's life today. Fans also continue discussing how different modern Hollywood feels without figures like him actively participating. Eastwood belonged to an era when actors carried mystery. They did not reveal every thought publicly. They allowed audiences to focus on the work rather than constant personal branding. That old-school identity made him stand apart even as entertainment culture transformed completely around him. Today, many viewers believe Hollywood no longer creates personalities with the same lasting cultural impact. Fame became faster, louder, and more temporary. But Clint Eastwood's influence endured for generations. That is why his eventual absence feels almost unimaginable. Because once someone like Clint Eastwood is gone, there may never truly be another figure quite like him again. And perhaps that is the hidden sadness underneath all the headlines about his health. Fans are not simply afraid of losing a legendary actor. They are afraid of losing what he represented. Strength, independence, classic cinema, emotional restraint, a disappearing generation. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood now stands as one of the final living reminders of that world. And while his body may continue slowing with time, the emotional impact he leaves behind appears stronger than ever. For millions around the globe, that legacy will outlive every headline, every rumor, and every heartbreaking health update still to come.